Hi, everyone. Today is Tuesday, June 1st, 2021, live streaming from Chicago. I'm Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Ntiva. Today, we're going to focus on VisionBot. And I know some of you are already familiar with VisionBot or may be familiar with VisionBot. This will be a bit of a refresh, but I also want to talk about some of the new features of VisionBot. If you are a client of Ntiva and you have Apple devices, then you will have access to Vision-Bot.app or VisionBot, as we call it. And to be fair, we only really give this to our primary contacts. So if you're not a primary contact, you may not have access to this tool, but we do give it to all of our clients in some way. So if you don't have access, let us know. The first time you log in, we have a new feature, two-factor authentication. This is a screenshot. I didn't want to trust that this would all go seamlessly live, so I did not. So I logged in ahead of time. If you log in for the first time, or if you've logged in the past and now you're logging in again, you haven't done so recently, you're going to be presented with a verification code box, which is your typical two-factor. This is new, and I do recommend that you check the box. Remember this device for 30 days, so you don't have to type it in so often. If you trigger that, it will send an email to the account that you use to log in. And in this case, earlier today, I logged in and here's my code. I entered that code into the box, and now I won't be bothered for another 30 days. And that feedback came from a client request. All of our ideas often come from clients. So if you have a suggestion, and frankly, this was on our list to do for a very long time, but it made it to the top of the list when we were pushed hard to say, we really need this, in order to continue using this. So we implemented 2FA. It's a very basic one. We don't have SSO integration, but in the future, maybe we will have that. So today, if you log in to VisionBot, of course, yours will look different than mine. This is a demo area, has lots of problems, so that I can show you the problem areas. But this is a tool that we developed because all of the mobile device management systems out there, the systems that collect data, device data, Apple, Macs, iOS, iPads, iPhones, all the device data, it's a lot. It's a lot of data. And we were finding that our team was missing information, not because it wasn't there, but because they had to go through so much data to find the piece that they really needed. It was easy to overlook information, and it was difficult to find information quickly. And this is a problem with all MDMs because there's so much data that it collects, device data. So we built this very simple interface to present to our team so they could get their work done most efficiently. And then we discovered that it would be helpful to share this information with our clients. And I'm often surprised, but I understand, I'm surprised that so many tech companies do not share this information with their customers. And I've had lots of conversations with other MSPs where I show them this tool, because we also sell this tool to other MSPs because it integrates with different MDMs. I say you want to use this for your support team, and you also want to share this with your clients. And they're typically hesitant to do that because it raises more questions by the client. But my point of view is there's so much that changes on a daily basis with technology that we need all hands on deck, all eyes on the moving target to help us manage this. So if you as a client or customer or partner see something that is critical to you that either we haven't seen or we will see during our next check-in or checklist or maintenance visit or whatever the term is, then that's super helpful. We get a jump on it. Or maybe it's just an opportunity to educate and have a conversation around why that's a warning, but not super important. So these are all good things, and I recommend sharing this information with your team when it's applicable. Obviously, I wouldn't share it with everyone on your team, but a good example is if you have someone that helps you manage your devices, make sure they have access to VisionBot. And let's go through exactly what VisionBot is. So your view may be different, but the default screen when you log in is the department or organization view. So if you have different office locations or different departments, then we often split them up so they're more manageable. If you have a small team, maybe 5, 10, even 20 team members, you probably just have one group. Although we have often added a spare group, especially during the pandemic. We had a lot of people go home and start working on machines, maybe desktops, office desktops, and they left their laptops in a drawer at home. And so those are now in a spare category, just for tracking purposes. But the real fun comes in the device area. And if I were to look at an entire organization, I could drill down just into one area and focus on those devices, or I could look at all the devices. So I'm currently looking at all these devices across all these demo organizations, and I see 26 devices. I see 19 Macs. This is my default view. I see 3 iOS devices, and I see other. In this case, other are virtual machines that we use for testing, but in some cases they might be PCs. We do have one integration with a Windows PC application that shows some of our PC clients here. The PC clients are not as robust in the information we collect, but let's go back to this view, and I want to focus on the Macs for starters, because this is where we spend a lot of our time. And keep in mind, our team has access to this, and your team has access to this. And the goal is, show me problem areas. If everything's green, I probably don't need to worry about it. Yeah, I may want to look up some information to help me make a decision, and I have access to that. But I'm most concerned with problem areas, and that's what this is meant to do, is show us the problem areas. So I'm going to go through these problem areas right now, one by one. The first one is last check-in. If a machine hasn't checked in, and this is one that we kept in here, has not checked in for, in this case, 1 year, the data is useless to us, right? We don't want to rely on that data. We don't want to look at it and say, oh, well, good thing it has a backup, because the backup is from January 2020. We still might want to reference the serial number to look up information about trade-in, maybe getting it recycled for money. And we might have some information like, what apps are on it, assuming it hasn't been wiped or anything like that. But this is really more for historical reference, and for those machines that maybe are put in a drawer for a specific purpose and then taken out later. We don't want to lose track of those. I find that if once a device is out of the system, it's very easy to lose track of. We have clients who have done that, and then they discover computers like months later. What is this? Who was using this? What is this for? Is it any good? And if it's not in the system, we really have no idea. So I encourage you to keep even your spares in the system so they're easier to track. But obviously, last check-in, we're not concerned about the data. And in fact, if a machine goes more than 28 days without checking in, it gets put into this area. And other than the check-in status, everything goes gray to kind of indicate that this is not data you can rely on. Workload. So Workload is something that we created to help us put some data behind a common question or concern, which is, my computer feels slow. If your computer feels slow and you're running either in the red or sometimes in the yellow for workload, then there's good evidence to show that, yes, something is wrong with that computer, or it's being taxed to the max. This is the one area that is debatable. And I say debatable because everything else here is pretty black and white. You either have 16 gigs of RAM or you don't. You either have a full hard drive or you don't. You have a backup or you don't. But workload is something that is relative, because we all experience speed and power differently. And if I'm sitting at a computer that I think is perfectly adequate, and I ask my friend who's a video editor to sit down and work on my computer, he may say, this computer is slow. So by someone saying the computer is slow, is it really slow because there's something going on with the data, the processing, the power? It really can't keep up? Or are they trying to do too much with the machine? Another way to look at this is, we've had clients come on board who have MacBook Airs. Traditionally, and the MacBook Airs have gotten more powerful over the years, but traditionally MacBook Airs are meant for consumers and students. They're very inexpensive, lightweight, not very powerful machines. And of course, the price looks great, but they're not very powerful. And even for people who push Excel to the limit, or maybe have a lot of web pages, web browsers open. They just can't keep up. So we had a client join us with a lot of MacBook Airs. We enrolled them. They were almost all in the yellow or red for workload. They were being pushed to the max, and we have the data to show that. Then again, we have some people say my computer's running slowly, and the workload is perfectly fine. So we know that the computer is capable of doing what they need to do, but there's probably something else going on. So this is kind of like having your doctor look at x-rays. Don't try to diagnose workload on your own. Please get us involved if you're concerned. And we've had to make changes over the years to keep up with Apple's changes in their processors. So in this area, we're looking at memory, we're looking at CPU load, and we're looking at uptime. And anything more than a week, if you're having a problem, it's always a good idea to restart, reset, and see if the problem continues or not. If you have any questions about exactly what workload is doing for you, we have these helpful help menus you can click on, and this applies to all areas. It explains what we're trying to display here, but sometimes you do want to get us involved to help interpret that. So let's go back to the list here. Battery issues are something that have always been an issue on notebooks as the batteries degrade over time. Used to be you could replace a battery. Today, they're all built in. The only way to replace an Apple battery is to send it back to Apple. And we created this because if a computer is under warranty, this one is not, but if it is still under warranty and it's showing battery health in yellow, or definitely in red, but even within yellow, you can often get that replaced under warranty, under Apple Care. And we have seen a handful of computers, we don't have any examples here, but a handful of client computers that did start to fail, and they were still maybe had a month or two left on their warranty. So let's get that battery replaced. We're going to get a lot more life out of that computer. It's going to feel a lot better, as the battery's going to be a lot going to last a lot longer. So I definitely recommend keeping an eye on that. And if you see any batteries that are both failing, and to be fair, 70% battery health is not a failing battery. It just means it's fallen below a certain threshold that Apple considers is low enough that they will replace it if it's still under warranty. And I think the threshold, as we say here, yeah, 79%. So between 50 and 79% is a warning. And that's pretty much a done deal. We have to coordinate that with Apple through Apple Care, but if we have the data here to show that it is below 79% and it's under warranty, then we can often get that battery replaced free of charge. Of course, it's still a pain to send it into Apple for repair and replacement, but it is oftentimes worth it. So coordinate with us if you have any questions about that. Let's see, storage. So storage is pretty straightforward. If it's 90% full, we're going to warn you about it. If it's 95% full, we're going to warn you with red instead of yellow. So the hard drives, this is a general rule. Obviously, if you have a very large hard drive and you're at 90%, even 95%, you may still have plenty of room to work on that hard drive. But it is also very concerning to me when I see these hard drives go as high as 99%. And I cannot stress enough that you do not want to let your hard drive fill up to 100%. Bad things happen at 100% hard drive being full. The computer just cannot operate with no place to put things. A restart will typically free up some space. But absolute worst case scenario is I've seen people fill up their hard drive and the computer locks up and it's in a bad situation. So don't let your hard drive get to that point. I know we're all guilty of it, myself included, of letting sort of the cruft sneak up over time and not doing the proper cleaning, but that is important. And I would say we often need help from internal contacts to nudge people to free up their hard drive, whether it's move things to a server, whether it's in the cloud or local, or simply delete things. Sometimes they just need a new computer with a bigger hard drive. Backup. So we track a few different types of backups. We don't track them all, but if you have a backup system we don't track, let us know. We track Druva. That's the current one that we're using and supporting 100%. We did track CrashPlan Pro. That was the previous cloud backup that we used. And technically we still support CrashPlan Pro, although Druva is more up to date than CrashPlan in the alerting here. And then we also built a system for tracking Time Machine. In fact, this is the only way I know of to have any type of central Time Machine auditing or management going on. Time Machine is really a personal backup. It's meant for personal backup. Apple built it for personal backup. They did not build it for corporate or business backup. We do not recommend it for business backup, but we've had enough people use it over the years and sometimes have trouble with it and sometimes rely on it that we built it into the system. And when I say rely on it is we've had people say, well, I was using Time Machine, so it must be there. And sometimes the data is not there. So if you intentionally use Time Machine, then this will tell you whether it's working or not. All of these things are sort of auditors for other things that should be going on, meaning we have an entire web page and admin area for Druva, just like we had for CrashPlan. There really is no admin area for Time Machine, but we have seen issues with Druva, with CrashPlan, and with Time Machine where the alerting that's built into that application isn't working properly. So you can think of VisionBot as a third-party auditor that goes out and looks locally and says, is this working or not? If you see something not working here, we need to get it fixed, or sometimes there's a problem in the opposite way where VisionBot is seeing data that tells us it's working or not working, but Druva or Time Machine or CrashPlan is telling us something else, and that just needs to be verified and reconciled. So once again, if you see something, say something, because it's worth investigating, especially when it comes to backups. Recycling, our recycling area is really just a quick and easy way to show you all of your devices that are 4 years or older. So you can run a report, a device report, which we'll talk about in a minute, and get a quote for what it would cost or what you would get back if you were to recycle those machines for money. And we'll talk about that in just a minute when I get to the device report. The last one I want to touch on is the repair program. Unfortunately, Apple has had several repair programs recently. And if you click on the help menu, we have a K-Base article that talks about them. We haven't tracked all of Apple's repair programs here. If you want to do that, I think you need to click on this link. But we've tracked the ones, like we're not tracking AirPod Pros because they're not in our system. But we are tracking the most recent iPhones, iPads, and Mac repair programs. We're not tracking Apple Watch repair programs either. But what this means is if you see one of these indicators here, R10, and R10 is the keyboard service program, which I can see in this list, or more easily just click on the R10. It's going to tell me what it is, and it's going to take me to Apple's page to describe in more detail what that is. If this person, Wyatt in this case, were to call in and say, I'm having a problem with my keyboard, I probably don't want to spend any time troubleshooting that problem because there's a pretty good chance it's related to this keyboard service program. And if I'm not so sure, I can read the description or I can go here and read more about it. But in this case, all of these models, including, the ones we've identified in VisionBot, qualify for this, whether they have Apple Care or not. So in some cases, you can get a keyboard replaced even if you don't have Apple Care, or even if Apple Care has expired, you can often get it replaced through a program like this. And I've seen, I don't know that we have any, but I've seen some notebooks, unfortunately, have as many as 3 repair programs. I think there's keyboard, drive program, backlit program, and either battery or keyboard program. So if you're not experiencing those issues, that's great. They don't apply to all models, but they apply to some. And some of them, you have to put the serial number in to further identify if they qualify or not. Unfortunately, VisionBot does not have the ability to look up to that level of detail. They just know this is a model that may have this problem. So if you encounter this problem on this device, investigate the repair programs, check the serial number if the serial number applies. The other thing VisionBot can't tell us is if this has already been repaired. There is a way for us to look that up with Apple's services. We can go into another area and look that up, but currently VisionBot cannot tell us if this device has already gone through this program or not. So this is something to help us and save us some time. But once again, we still need to do a little bit of investigation. Okay, so that is those are all of the sort of trouble areas that we track. And then I want to talk briefly about these two buttons, device report and app report. And I can run a device report in this case across all devices, or if I drill down into any one of these, it will run a device report just for these devices that I show listed here. And in fact, this one's a little different. If I run this report, it will give me a little help menu on how I can send this report to Second Life Mac to get a quote for how much they would pay me for these devices. And we work with Second Life Mac because they're here locally in the Chicago area, but we have also worked with Apple's trade-in program. Apple has a trade-in program very similar to Second Life Mac, and they will pay you money to send these devices in, sometimes several $100s. Apple devices are worth quite a bit of money, even when they're end of life, at the end of their useful life in a business. And one of the things that you can do is Apple has a lookup. You can just take a serial number in this case and go to Apple Trade-In. Although Second Life Mac will often give you a little bit better money. And to be honest with you, you could even get more money for these on, let's say, a eBay service if you sold it yourself. But that can be often time consuming and a pain in its own way. So these programs are very nice. But if you were to go to apple.com/shop/trade-in, you could scroll down to computer and just enter the serial number from, here, it's Apple, and then enter the serial number. Sometimes it will identify exactly what it is, and you can verify that with the information in VisionBot, or sometimes it asks you for this information, and you can once again go to VisionBot to get this information. Which one did I click on? Here, I know. Which one did I click on? I'll go to search, and I'll put in the serial number, and this is the one I clicked on. So this is an old MacBook Air from 2014. It's considered vintage. This is not a term that we made up. This is Apple's categorization. They have vintage and they have obsolete. Vintage means you may have trouble getting parts for this. Obsolete means there are no longer parts available. This one, let's see what this one's worth. This is the one, 2014, 128 gig SSD. We can see here 121 gig, 128. Yes, that's the same thing. 2014. Yes, this is exactly the model. And I'll say yes. Does it turn on? Yes. Is everything working? We'll say yes. Is the screen and enclosure of your Mac in good physical shape? I will say yes, but if you turn it in and there are scratches on the screen, they will reduce the amount that they will pay you. And yeah, let's give them the adapters. And despite the fact that this is a relatively old and not a very powerful machine, I could still get $230 in trade-in credit, meaning a Apple card for this. Or if I go to Second Life Mac, they will pay me cash. Or Apple does have a business program where you could get cash. It just takes a little more effort to do that. Once again, we can help you with any and all of that. So let's go back to our list, and let's just run a report across the entire fleet here. And basically we get all this information in a column that I could either hide or remove columns if I don't want to see some of this information. I could also rearrange columns if I like to view it differently. And then of course I could download that information, open it in Excel or Numbers and manipulate that. So this is really just a quick way to view things across your entire fleet, including benchmark scores, which we also have identified. This number here next to the processor is a benchmark score. I do want to point out that this is a little loose. Earlier I said everything here is black and white except for workload. I must say benchmark scores is another area that must be used with judgment. And that is because ideally we would have benchmark scores for every single model iteration, and currently we don't. So if I look at a MacBook Air, this one's an i7, Apple might have sold at that time an i5 variation. So what we've done in this case is we've just given you the base benchmark score for each model. So you can kind of get an idea. that if I were to sort from the weakest machine in the fleet all the way up to the most powerful machine in the fleet, I would have a rough idea of what that means. And I can already see there's probably, if I dig down deeper, this 13-inch MacBook Air from 2017, is it really less powerful than this 13-inch mid-2014 MacBook Pro? I also see this was called Collins MacBook Air. That is a name that somebody gave to it, probably due to a migration, but it's actually a MacBook Pro. So at first I was thinking, well, this MacBook Air from 2017 cannot be less powerful than this MacBook Air from 2014. But now that I see this as a Pro versus an Air, that's totally possible. The benchmark score, keep it in mind that it's a good way to have an overview, but sometimes we have to drill down deeper, and we may find that this base score is not as good as it could be because the model you purchased is much higher in power. And the reason we did this is so many people, they don't really understand all the differences between the Apple variations, and they just rely on the purchase date. And we saw clients say, well, here's a brand new machine and here's an old machine. I'm just going to get rid of the old machine. And sometimes they were getting rid of machines that are more powerful than more recent machines. So it's totally possible to buy a very high-end model one year, and the next year the budget's a little tighter. Maybe you don't spend as much, and you buy a newer machine, but it's just not as powerful as your older machine. So this is why we wanted to have this information available, and this is what we often use as a guideline, these benchmark scores. Some other information that you'll find here, of course, is the age and warranty information, and then the security status, which I'll also show you the detail area of that. Security and enabled users, we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. And the last check-in time. So a lot of data here. Once again, if you don't understand what it means or how to use it, just let us know. And if you see something that missing that you'd like to see here, let us know, because we might be able to add it. So let's drill down into what some of this information really means. We'll run through this very quickly. Serial number is pretty clear. This one is tagged as supervised, which means it has full Apple management capabilities. If it's not supervised, we may be limited in what we can or cannot do. This is once again a designation that Apple identifies. It identifies a device as supervised with full management capabilities or not. And then we have a link to Adigy, which would take us deeper into the mobile device management MDM system, but most clients do not have access to that. That is just for our team. So you can click that link, but if you don't have a login, it's not going to do anything for you. We've got the model information, which we now pull from Apple. If we click on this, it will take us to Apple's detail page on this model. So that's a nice shortcut. We talked about the repair programs. We've got the processor and the benchmark score. We've got the purchase date and the warranty date. There was a time period where we had to enter the purchase and warranty information by hand. We no longer do that. This is a relatively new feature. We're now getting this information through an API call directly to Apple. So this is accurate information. And if it's not accurate, let us know, because we have seen very rare cases where the information at Apple is incorrect, but of course they're going to ask for proof of purchase to correct that. Let's see, last check-in, we talked about that, storage, backup, memory. This was more helpful when memory was upgradable. Some of you may see in some models where you can click on a link and show you what upgrades you can apply or what memory you can add to this machine. But right now it's really just informational. It is important when a computer is not upgradable, like most of the laptops are today, it is important to buy that memory from Apple and get it at time of purchase, because you cannot do it later. You can't upgrade later like you used to. Security area, more and more we are encrypting hard drives, especially notebooks, and we want to make sure all users can decrypt. Here we go. Here's an example of a machine that is encrypted, but only some users can decrypt. And what that means is it could be that only your employee can decrypt this computer. Chances are they are the ones that can decrypt it. Otherwise, they couldn't use their machine if they restarted. But it also means IT cannot decrypt that computer, except because this one is supervised, we actually do have some additional tools we could use to decrypt that computer. We may have to lose all the data on it to do so, but we could get it back to a working state. If this were not supervised, that would be, and this were only decrypted or could be decrypted by the employee, then they are in complete control of that machine if something happens or they leave you with a machine that you cannot decrypt. So it is important to have all users enabled, meaning the employee and IT, or if we co-manage your internal IT. And we do recommend encryption today, especially for notebooks. So if you're not encrypting or if some users are not able to decrypt, let us know. And there's some more information here that probably does a better job than I just did of explaining it. And the last piece is endpoint protection. A lot of applications, Malwarebytes is the one we use and recommend, but a lot of endpoint protection products, they don't show up as applications. And even if they do, it's kind of difficult to know if it's being run or not, what version they're on. Like if Malwarebytes was not displayed here, I would just have to know to look for it here. But if I looked for it here and did a search, I wouldn't find it because it's not an application in the sense of a traditional application. It's something that runs in the background. So we bring that to the forefront here. And this has been great because we've discovered some computers that were not running endpoint protection that we thought were. And we've also discovered some old endpoint protection products that are still floating around that need to be removed. It may be okay for you to have multiple endpoint protection products listed here, but it should be intentional. It should not just be, oh yeah, we used to use WebRoot and it's still showing up. I'm not worried about it. If you're not using WebRoot and it's still showing up here, we should clean it out and get rid of it because it might still be doing something that could be contributing to slowdowns on your computer. We talked about battery. We talked about workload. I touched on applications and the version numbers. This is often helpful if you want to check a version of, say, Photoshop or Microsoft Word. In fact, the other report I want to get back to is the app report. If I run an app report, it's going to show me all of the Adobe apps. And then we also have Apple, Microsoft, and other. And the reason we did this is there are a lot of teams who work together, and it's really important that they are on the same version. Otherwise, it could cause issues passing files back and forth or just collaborating when somebody has a different version of, say, Photoshop or InDesign, especially in an InDesign in-copy workflow. Super critical that you're all running the same version. You can see here we've got different versions of Photoshop running and lots of people who don't have Photoshop at all. We also look at Apple products. Keynote is another one that it's just, if you're doing any type of online Keynote collaboration or passing files back and forth, you got to have the same version. And unfortunately, Apple often surprises us with updates that break that workflow. It's so frustrating. This is a great area to kind of check on your team. And of course, Microsoft is another area, and other. We added other because security teams wanted to know, are we running the latest version of Firefox and or Chrome? And they needed to show the auditors that they were doing that. So this is an area where you can get that information. Once again, you can download it and do what you want with it. A couple other things I missed here is just you can sort by age of a machine, age of the devices, by the model, and by the OS. You can see a summary up here, 14 notebooks, desktops, the operating systems. And really, this is just more for visual flair. I don't know that it's that useful, but it was something we built in here to give you a quick overview. Don't worry if you're not 100% green. That's really hard these days to achieve 100% green. You're almost always going to have a couple warnings, maybe even a critical that you need to follow up with because of a full hard drive or a backup that hasn't run. Let's figure out why that is and get it fixed. The last thing I will touch on is recent actions. And recent actions, you do have to hit the refresh button. What that does is it goes out and it looks at the MDM and it says, has anything happened to this machine recently? And this is a list of what has happened. This is another area where you'll probably need our help deciphering this. This is really meant for our team as a tool. If someone were to call in and say, I'm having a problem, maybe they're having a problem with Keynote and Keynote was just installed or updated, we could quickly identify that. And then we could go into Adigy and do some additional investigation, or we may need to look at the installed application or even talk to the employee. This is for our information. You probably won't use this or be able to decipher it very well here. And the last pieces are OS summary, the last user to log in. Keep in mind, this data is updated first at the MDM level, and then we look to the MDM every hour. And it doesn't look like in the demo, I think only administrators have a view of the last sync time, but every hour. So it could be possible that if somebody did just make a change or did just update their operating system, that it hasn't made its way to VisionBot yet. So, don't get freaked out if you're like, well, I just applied an update to my operating system. Why don't I see it here? It could just need another hour to make that information up to date in VisionBot. And then location, this will take me quickly back to the overview. And then we do have IP address information. If I click on that, it will display it to me, and MAC address information. We obscure that just once again for security reasons, but I think most of you would have access to that if you needed it for troubleshooting reasons. So this is a general overview of VisionBot. It's constantly changing. We're adding new features almost on a monthly basis. Some of them behind the scenes we're tweaking. Others, like purchase and warranty information directly from Apple is a little more visible. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see to make your life easier, to make your reporting easier, to work better with your security team or your auditors or your managers, please let us know, because this is a tool not just for our internal support team, but also for our clients. I did want to mention one more thing. If you are logged in under your account, you'll see your name up here, and you go to my profile. And as an administrator, you may see a few more options. But under here in the profile page, there is a subscribe to weekly report. I do recommend you subscribe. It is on by default, although you can turn it off. That is the only way to get the weekly report from VisionBot showing you a summary of all of the device concerns. In addition, if you were to go to support.forgetcomputers.com, we're slowly rebranding this from Forget Computers to Ntiva. This is now the Ntiva Apple Help Center. We have an area on Apple Toolkit. And if you click on Apple Toolkit, there's an area on VisionBot, Apple's exchange and repair extension programs, which I discussed earlier. We also have some new authentication security. Two-factor authentication, which I touched on, is on by default. You must have a minimum of 12 characters for a password. And after 5 failed login attempts, your account will be blocked for 3 hours. If you absolutely need it sooner than that, contact us. Or if you're not sure why your account was blocked at all, maybe someone is trying to get into your account, please let us know. Thank you for joining. Thanks for watching. Bye.